how do you value the project in order to determine the audience and the market for it? So how are you guys valuing? You know, I've heard you so far say, oh, it's an excellent story. I mean, that's obvious. You're not going to do a project you don't believe the story. But coming to value itself, how are you going to prioritize? This is the project you really want to put your time into, and you think the market's going to value it as well. How are you guys evaluating that?
Wow.
Good question, right?
The unfortunate reality is comparison films sometimes. And that's not just me saying subjectively we look at other films, but if you look at what distributors do, and this includes studios to independent distributors, they look at what other films are relatively similar in genre, cast, whatever, and work backwards from there and build a P&L. And I think the approach of doing that is to some degree something that we like to employ. I mean, it's never hard science, and all of a sudden you can disrupt what's been a constant and completely change the system. I mean, we certainly don't necessarily just look at a comp model and say this is the absolute way, but we do build worst case scenario models off of those. So when you look at a project, we can build what I would describe as a worst case scenario model. Some sales agents call them take prices, which is crazy because they'll miss those take prices all the time. And you're like, wait, those are our worst case scenario numbers. What happened? Right. But we like to use that baseline as a general set of metrics. And then look, anything above that, sure. I mean, then that's calculated risk, right? Then we're saying, okay, well, we're going ahead and trying something that hasn't really been done before. It hasn't been proven, but so what? Right. So that's how we would suggest it.
Okay.
We value a project really, I mean, just by our own personal enthusiasm for it and how passionate we are about it. And I think, and then to the part of the question about how do we place a value on how the market will value it, we don't. I mean, I actually think the worst way to do it is to try to figure out what people want, because I think people don't know what they want until they see it a lot of times, and studios the same thing. I mean, if you ask financiers what they're looking for, I find it sort of a useless exercise, because they're looking for one thing now and they're looking for something completely different.
They don't know what they want.
They really don't. And so, you know, trying to say, okay, well, this kind of movie worked last weekend or last summer, so let's try to follow that line, I really think is not the way to go. So we just go by, you know, our own passion and enthusiasm and the enthusiasm of our creative partners, you know, writers and directors.
Awesome.